Hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. So nice to have you here. I'm joined, as I usually am, by my friends Gregg Braden and Penny Kelly. Penny, how are you?
I'm great. I'm great. And I hope everybody out there is too, including you two boys, John.
And Greg, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. We're missing Kingsley today, so it's there's a song. It's just the three of us. I'm doing really well. I'm coming to you from a very cold but sunny northern New Mexico high desert day, and I got to tell you, I'm really looking forward to this conversation that we're going to have today.
Let's go around the circle here and see what you have in mind. Greg, what you been thinking about, my friend?
Well, on my mind these last couple of weeks, there's so much going on. I was really focused on what happened in South Korea yesterday and last night. Martial law was declared for a period of time, military. That was a real insurrection that was happening there. But what was interesting to me was all of the media, everybody was focused on that to the exclusion a lot of other things and other events happening earlier in the week. So this is what I really look into when we're all looking over here, what's going on behind the scenes. Not a word in the US media about this, John. What happened on Tuesday of this week, China has now shut down the ability of the United States to import key rare earth elements that we need for technology. Yeah, well, we're saying this for a long time. We're developing an industry and projecting a world based on 17 rare earth elements that we don't have, that are in the hands primarily two deposits, one in Russia and one in China. Specifically, they shut down the production. They banned the U.S. being able to buy gallium, germanium, antimony, and graphite. Those are the rare earth elements. And then the additional elements that they are now banning is tungsten, molybdenum, titanium, tin, chromium, and cesium. Those aren't rare earths, but we get most of these from someone who's not our best friend, our best ally right now. So that happened, and nobody's talking about that, but it is put a kink in the wartime projections because our military depends on these rare earth elements. So that happened just in the last 48 hours. And the other thing, Putin delivered a speech, and he delivered it in English, which is really rare for him. He was speaking to the West more than he was speaking to his own people. And the bottom line, he feels that the events have gone so far that a nuclear exchange is the only way to solve this, is the posturing that he's putting out there right now. And at the same time, the US, France, and the UK are authorizing new long-range weapons for Ukraine that can go deeper into Russia. And this is his response to that. And we're not hearing much about Putin's response in the mainstream. So those two things, and it is all happening within the context of the congressional disclosure of UFOs or UAPs. But what happened this week, there was a sudden uptick in sightings all over the world. And the mind blower to me, and I don't know how many people saw this, was the sphere that was spotted over the Manchester airport. Every time they'd scramble the fighters, this thing would outrun them. And then it came and landed on the tarmac, and the pilots in the British Air, they were in the cockpit, and they were photographing this thing sitting right there, and it's all over the internet. So all of this has happened just within probably the last 72 hours, and I think it's going to play into the bigger conversation that we're going to have today.
So Cliff High was right.
Something's up.
Yeah, well, his machine has since 2009 had said that 39 days after the Joe Rogan and Donald Trump interview, you'd see UFOs in the sky. And then I'm impressed about how well the American policy toward our major. opponents is working out. I mean, it seems to work the same way for China as it did for Russia. So I don't know what we're doing here. Penny, what do you got?
Oh, well, okay. So some of the same things Greg said, but I'm not going to say a whole lot because I want to save as much time as possible for this conversation today. But the war behavior, I've been watching that war behavior for like 3 years now, going on 3 years. And it just keeps ramping up. And I don't see a war, but I keep seeing the behavior ramping up and the talk and the stupidity. But then the other thing that I have been really disturbed by is watching the money laundering, like the money to Ukraine going out, like, okay, we got a little bit of time left to get a little more money to put in our pockets, send another 725 million to Ukraine. And I'm just going to say that the UFO thing, I think, is coming, but not in quite the way people are expecting. So,
Yeah, thank you. Cliff has been quite explicit about saying that this is kind of a long-term kind of process, and that there's a specific
right.
kind of evolutionary kind of acclimation strategy. And but Greg's right. There's stuff all over the place. There was one over the top of Brooklyn for a good period of time.
All over South America, you know.
Well, they were all over the DC, over the White House.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the language they're using. They're calling them drones
Yeah.
rather than any kind of a craft. Now, how they know it's a drone, or if they're just told to use that language. There was the one, I think, John, the one you were just talking about, that hovered all night, and people went to bed. They got up the next morning, they looked, it was still there, and as soon as it got light, they disappeared, and then when it got dark, they came back again.
Yeah.
And the part that is coming out in the congressional hearings is that these sightings are rampant over nuclear weapons stockpiles and over nuclear power generation facilities. They're hovering over these things.
Well, thank you both very much. Yeah, it's been kind of wild and crazy. There is a very distinct kind of window that's open for us in terms of this emergent new world and our ability to drive, design an alternative to the status quo. And that we very much need to get on that and get it going. And that there's the other forces are that are arrayed on the other side of extraordinary capabilities and resources, and only get better. And so the door closed. There's a distinct place in the not too distant future where the door closes, and we just have really got to move. And so it's not a time for sitting down and hoping for the best. And so one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to do our transition talk here in January. Do another one and bring all up to date this information from these multiple kind of sources to indicate and try to talk about the path forward. And so that's what we're doing here.
Yeah.
So our topic today is what's driving all of this big change. We talked last time about whether there was an effort to kind of suppress the evolutionary vector, the evolutionary push for the species, and there's all kinds of indicators that suggest that is in fact in place. That depopulation is an integral part of all of this, and certainly using the technology to disempower individuals and to essentially control almost anything and everything that we do. That's some of what I'm going to talk about on my transition talk here coming up on January, because I've been exposed to some new information about the depth and the breadth of the kind of influence of the technology and where it's going in nanotech and other kinds of things that are just mind-boggling and galvanizing. I mean, you look at this and you say, wow, I didn't know that all of that was going on. And once you get a sense of the kind of momentum of it all, it is really, for me at least, it generates this sense of urgency that says that this is the game and this is real, and we got to get something going. But all of this raises the question about who's driving this. I mean, who's the ultimate kind of force that's trying to influence in these extraordinary ways right now that have obviously been put in place for centuries in getting to here. We've got a compounded kind of layering of all kinds of cultural and economic and political and other kind of educational and religious systems that have all gotten us to this point where, it's almost closing down. And the question is, so what is this influence and what's the objective here? And what is this all about? I can come back and make some comments about it, but Penny, let's start with you. What do you think?
So if we take the question, who or what is driving these kinds of changes? Was it 2 years ago, John, a year ago, something like that, I came to Transition Talks and I talked about, look, this is a takeover. It's an effort to take over the entire planet. And I laid out just the barest minimums of that. But I did say, it's almost always done through health. Those are the technologies that make they put the finishing touch. And it looks very natural. People start dropping like flies and voila, all of a sudden, you got your selected people that you're going to deal with and all the excess is gone. So let me go back and just pull from a couple different sources that I have read and known. And I'm going to start with Lorraine Moray. She was a gal who really understood radiation and things like that. And she got into some choice places and learned some choice things, and then started to do some really good research. And what she said is that the group of people who were in Persia, the ancient Persia, before the Zoroastrians, they're still here. They have about 10 or 12 families. Those are the same 10 or 12 families that the little man in brown robes showed me. They are in charge of everything on the planet, with only a couple of exceptions. And those 10 or 12 families, and she names them. Here are the names: Farnese, Borgia, Colonna, Gaetoni, Medici, Pamphili, Orsini, Aldobrandini, Chigi, and Conti. These were they look like they're Italian people, but these were the Persians who migrated from Persia up into Italy, and then from there kind of spread around. So they are very, very careful about their bloodlines. They are the bloodlines of European royal families. And they are the ones who are at the root of all of the big corporations. And the corporation, when the concept of a corporation can be introduced into a population, usually that's like a red flag that says the takeover is 75% complete. And because that puts into place all of the structures that lull everybody into thinking life is good, we have everything, we just have to show up and do this little job, we get money, we can buy whatever we want. And once that corporation is in effect or is in power, it starts to take over. It becomes a person. the word corporation is specifically chosen as a representative of the corpus, the body. And so here we are, 200, I think it's 200 of the biggest corporations on the planet are owned by these royal families. And they, I'm just going to say it, I don't have any proof except what I know from before I came here. Okay. They are in touch with people from elsewhere who have been here for forever, who think that the human population, that's us, is getting out of control. There's too many. We have taken over the planet and all the good spaces in their mind, and they would really like to see the human population reduced. Some of those ETs are not good. They are the ones who said, we'll help you. There's too many people. Could you help us? We'll help you become big and powerful if you can reduce the population. So there's room for the other 36 races from elsewhere in the cosmos that are here and that are pretty much in hiding because we're such a small-minded, scientifically ignorant, programmed people that we don't have a cosmic outlook. We don't make space in our minds and in our lives for other people. So having said that, I'll just say that those people who came from the Tigris-Euphrates regions were cannibalistic. They preferred human meat. They had access to a very advanced technology. That technology is now in the hands of those 10 or 12 families. And they, I'll just say they have transport systems that put our best transport to shame. They have healing systems, the same thing. They have just all kinds of conveniences and technologies that they don't want to share with us. And right now it's come down to, let's get rid of them. That's us. Let's get rid of the humans. They aren't good. And, and I beg to differ. So that's who is driving and the reason that they're driving. You said just a minute ago, John, we are in a place where we're going to have to up our game, something big, over this next year or 2 years, because it looks like it's going to be over for the human and the possibilities of the human DNA. And I'll just say that we have been injected with all kinds of technologies. And that is remote controllable. However, back in June, I was asked to, by my people, teach your Intuition One class online, free for everybody. And I was like, no, I can't do that. That's how I make my living. I can't give that away for free. And they just wouldn't let up, just kept coming back. Please teach this, start, begin now. And so finally by September, I said, okay, let me see how I would do this. And I started, but I didn't really understand until just recently that it was like, well, okay, maybe that'll help. Yes, that'll help a lot because the injected technology is susceptible to our consciousness, very much more so than any kind of remote controlled or beam technology. And I'm beginning to see, oh, okay, that's why we're so insistent. You're going to need this if you're going to make it through the next 2 years. So I think we're looking at a period of time where we are absolutely going to need to advance, expand our consciousness. And I'll stop there because I'm running out of voice.
Wow. Well, Penny, thank you. for
Yeah.
that. My primary degree, I think a lot of our viewers know, is as a geologist. I'm an earth scientist. And this is what tipped the scales for me. So I'm going to go through a series of systems that we
Okay.
depend upon in our world today. And let's take a look at what's happening. There is a concerted effort to change the physical planet we live on. Geoengineering is what some people call it. Terraforming is what other people call it. But the bottom line, the United Nations working in concert with the World Economic Forum have targeted the year 2030, and that year comes up a lot in a lot of things, to not only remake society, but to remake the planet. And the most concerning of those goals is that they want to reduce our carbon dioxide levels from where they are right now. They want to knock those levels back to 212 parts per million. Now, if people are not familiar with CO2 levels, they say, what's the big deal? First of all, carbon dioxide, we now know, is not what's driving the temperature fluctuations on the planet. And we've talked about that before. That is not speculation, that is science. And the real scientists know this. So temperature and CO2 is not the problem that we've been led to believe. Why would they want to knock this CO2 back? Well, as a geologist, I went and looked into geologic records. The last time we saw these kinds of levels was in a geologic period called the Pleistocene. And this was a time that was not good for life. The CO2 levels averaged around 220 parts per million. The forests died, large mammals became extinct. Temperatures did drop to some degree. There was more ice in the north. Ocean life dropped. That was the average 220 parts per million. They want 212 parts per million. 180 is a death sentence for life on Earth. So they are toying with this very narrow range between 180, which is the cutoff point, and 212 is where they want it. So the bottom line, the proposals that are coming to change our climate are not good for us. They're not good for humans. Okay, so as a geologist, I'm looking at that. Then you begin looking at, Benny, we just talked about this a few minutes ago, the social engineering, the concerted effort to break the social bonds between the rich and the poor, the blacks and the whites, Christians and the Muslims, the Jews and the Muslims, and now between men and women and adults and children, and now the genders. All of these things, and they're being done very successfully through slick marketing. A lot of it's in social media, psychological programming, indoctrination. All of these things successfully, we're breaking the social bonds that hold us together as nations, societies, communities, and families. That makes us vulnerable. It makes us susceptible to the agendas of others because we become fearful when we don't have those social bonds. That's not good for us. That's not good for humans. Now the concerted effort for large-scale war, not just what's happening with Iran and Israel, where they're pushing for the nuclear exchange, but now the last few weeks between the Western push for a nuclear exchange between Ukraine and Russia. The bottom line is that the expenditure of armaments, the expenditure of arsenals, the depletion of weapons and arsenals, the depletion of fighting soldiers, of men and women of fighting age, all of those things are being depleted. The U.S. is depleting its arsenals by supplying. We're 3 years behind in some of the shells that we're looking at in supplying Ukraine with just the conventional weapons. That's not good for us. That's not good for humans. Then we look at what is happening at the same time, the transhuman movement, the concerted effort, the policies are being written, the laws are being enacted to replace or augment human biology, and they want it done by the year 2030. Computer chips of the brain, RFID chips, are being accepted now in Northern European Sweden. There was a there was a television special. A man. Now this is an extreme, but a man had 15 computer RFID chips in his hand and his forearm and his wrist, and they show him walking down the street. The birds are singing. The sky is blue. He says he's never felt freer in his life because he leaves the house with no driver's license. He doesn't need his car keys. He doesn't need a checkbook or a credit card. And he can go about his life because it's all in those RFID chips, not knowing what the price he's paying for that in terms of his health and his freedom. And that's just one example. But the concerted effort to bring the transhuman agenda to a global population by the year 2030, that's not good for us. It's not good for humans. So you look at the systems that are being proposed or implemented right now, none of them are good for humans. So who is driving the change? As a scientist, I have to say a non-human force is driving those changes. Right. So you asked a number of questions here, John. You said, who's doing it? What are the objectives? I think the objectives is we're in for the battle for our lives and for our planet. And it's an ancient battle. It's been going on, given different names over time, whether we call it angels and demons or we call it ETs and aliens, we're talking about the same forces perceived differently through the ages. We're in a fundamental battle between the forces of light and dark, and we perceive that as good and evil. And that battle is flaring now. It ebbs and flows. It's flaring these next 5 years. Now, I agree with you, Penny. These next 5 years and 2 years for sure are going to set the stage for the outcome of that battle. We are being pushed to give away our humanness in exchange for efficiency and speed of information processing, AI, computer chips. The price that we're being asked to pay, and I'm going to use the word that we've used in the past, it's the word human divinity. Divinity is the goal of the evil forces. Divinity is the goal of the ETs and the aliens, because our divinity, the contemporary definition, is the ability to transcend perceived limitations. Our ability to become more, to triumph in the challenges of life, is linked to human divinity. Divinity is imagination. That's an expression. Creativity, innovation, love, compassion, healing are all expressions of divinity. Our psychic abilities, our ability for empathy, sympathy, compassion, these are all facets of human divinity. With them, we triumph. Without them, we succumb to these forces, however we want to identify these forces. And I think the sooner that people recognize that all these proposals, when you look at them in the big picture, they are not good for life. Not just humans, they're not good for life. So apparently, who or whatever they are, they come from a world that is lower carbon dioxide, cooler temperatures, darker, less sunlight, more cloud cover, and less population to confront them. And right now, we are being groomed for defeat, is what is happening unless we wake up. And the good news is we do have everything we need. When we embrace the deep truth of our humanness and we live the best version of our lives, we live our love, our healing, our joy, we celebrate our humanness, we celebrate our empathy, sympathy, compassion. Penny, thank you for teaching everything you're teaching about intuition. That's how we triumph, because we are a highly advanced, technologically sophisticated, soft technology that is no match. We are so far beyond what that technology has in store for us. So I'm going to stop there. I covered the three questions. Who is it? What are the objectives? And what's happening? So there it is.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That whole statement that you just made, I mean, I think that covers it, but that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's so much going on that I think people have heard the word transhuman or technocracy, and they're like, yeah, there's a chip in my arm. They don't recognize the whole program that goes with that. And that program is geared toward exterminating them.
I agree. Penny, I was just with a group of scientists, and what they said to me was, this is the next logical step in human evolution. And I said, no, it is a form of forced evolution. It is not a natural evolution.
Right.
And the price that we pay is giving away. The point is, all the technology they want us to embrace is finite in its scalability. It can only scale to the point where the materials limit the processing of information. Human cells, human neurons, human tissue, the scalability is infinite. Every time we reach a limit, we morph and we adapt to embrace those new conditions. And we do it again and again and again. We're an extraordinary form of soft technology.
Yeah. Let me just add something there. Sorry, John, I can feel that you have something to say, but I have to say something. We take that idea of a form of soft technology. Everything is conscious. It isn't all human consciousness. A stone has stone consciousness, and a tree has tree consciousness, and so on and so forth. But every single amino acid, mineral, vitamin, peptide, polypeptide, whatever you can imagine, every single thing contributes to what you call that divinity, Gregg. It contributes to consciousness and it expands consciousness. When you put technology inside of you and you start interfering with those signals coming from those vitamins, minerals, aminos, and structures that self-assemble, it's too complicated to go into, but
but what you're saying, this is the definition of evil. It's a modern definition. Anything that denies us from accessing our divinity is evil. There's biological evil, technological evil, financial evil,
that's
psychological evil, and all of it is incoming right now. And most people don't know that they are casualties of this ancient battle between good and evil.
And there is a universe-sized takeover force that is in play, that is trying to consume the whole thing. And so what we did, they're talking, what we did is we went to the keeper of time, who was the one who was able to look at the big ball of oneness that is everything, and be able to go back into this, to the place in this ball of oneness that includes everything, and say, this is where that trajectory started that's turning into the complete takeover of the universe. And it's right now. And so they're saying that you can make one of two decisions, and if you capitulate and go along with the technologic kind of track, and what it leads ultimately to, as you both are describing, is this comprehensive takeover, increasingly sophisticated AI maybe based kind of future that you can never extract yourself from. But we are sitting at this point where I can make the decisions, and in the context of this conversation, within the next year or two, that's kind of at the most, to make a decision that we build the alternative track that is a counterbalance to what otherwise is this giant kind of consumptive force that takes over everything. Now, that was a single interesting data point that I talked about a number of months ago. Since then, I've now found another independent source that's saying a variation of the same thing. Very detailed in saying that this is really important right now. And the reason is because of the decision that you can make now, and what its long-term implications are. And so this is not just about, politics and who goes what or some other kind of thing, as all three of us have been saying. This is a really freaking big deal. Consider the fact that they've got computer capabilities far in advance of anything that we know of, that they have done their scenario work literally and worked their way across all. If they did this, what would we do? Or so on. And they've considered and done the contingency planning for all of this. And they have in place the capabilities to defend themselves against any known threat that they have been able to find. And so the point here is that the way forward is not to confront them. It is not to threaten them, because they've thought about all of that, and they've got all of the money, and they've got all the media, and they've got all the nanobots, and they've got all of the other kind of stuff. And you drive right into their trap, if you will. What they haven't thought about, and that is not in their planning, is the possibility of the emergence of a new world, an alternative world, not a threat to the existing track, but a jump off to a different one. And that presents a very, very kind of interesting and powerful alternative and initiative, motivation for those of us who are trying to think about this thing. Is this is all about getting a critical mass of people together who see the world in a new way. We've got to build a new model for a new world. We've got to have this new concept of what humanity is. And, that's what's driving the stuff that we're trying to do here at the Arlington Institute.
So what you're saying is we take our bat and ball and go home and say, we're not playing.
That's right. Not in your, not your game. Yeah. We're not.
Yeah. Well, John, what you're describing, this is the difference between the old thinking that sees conflict as a win or lose of opposing forces.
Yeah.
In the ancient but current battle between the forces of good and evil, it's not a battle that we want to win in the old way of thinking. It's a battle that we want to triumph. And the way that we triumph is by living the best version of ourselves, by living what our humanness makes possible. By virtue of doing that, we have triumphed over the evil, because the goal of the evil is to deny our humanness, to deny our love, our compassion, our empathy, our sympathy, our imagination, our creativity. When we live that, we have triumphed without conflict in that way. Sometimes we have to fight. And I think because we didn't nip this in the bud years ago, sometimes the battle becomes kinetic. But even then, this is what I think is so important. Then the spiritual facet comes in, the spiritual aspect. When we do we fight based in the love that we feel for our families and our friends and our neighbors that stand behind us in that battle? Or do we fight because of the hate and the fear that we've been driven to succumb to by the forces in front of us? That's very, very different. If we're fighting because we hate, then that's how evil triumphs, because it has made us become something that we would never want to be. So this is it. The new world you're talking about is where we live the best version of ourselves and the best of what humankind has to offer.
Let me recast that from my point of view a little bit. Clearly, you have to be proactive in this space. I mean, that's the central kind of notion here. You can't sit back and hope it's all going to be good. And you certainly can't just meditate and that you're going to work your way into this space. There is a place for that. But I would never characterize that as fighting. I think that there's a twist here, and it comes from the difference between competition and cooperation. And it really is a repositioning that says, let's just build a new thing. This is Bucky Fuller world. That says that you don't get a new world, or you don't do a future by confronting the old one. You go build a different one that makes obsolete where you've been before, and that's where really where we've got to go. And the the thing that comes from multiple sources that I'm being exposed to is that you if you confront these folks directly, if you threaten them, that's the red flag, and they focus on you, and here they come, and they've got all the guns, and they've got all the electrons, and they've got all of the other kind of stuff that they need. And so the objective is not to fight, but to take this other path and start to build a new world. And they're going to have their hands full trying just to keep things going in the coming years, because it's clearly coming apart in terms that they need everything they can do to kind of keep it going. And that is the opening that allows us to go in a new direction. There's a place in there where there's the essence of humanity that has been constrained and layered all over by all of this external kind of stuff for centuries now. And now you're at this really interesting little point where you could extract yourself into this giantly powerful, amazing kind of unencumbered kind of consciousness that could kind of be the denizens of this new world, and around which you could build this new world. I mean, this is really big.
Let me play devil's advocate for just a moment, okay? So Gregg was talking about, we have to be who we are as humans, our creativity, our divinity, our joy, all that stuff. And you're talking about building a new world. So as the devil's advocate, I would say, how are you going to pull that off when the people that you need to be building that new world need all the stuff that those corporations bring into their life? There's a practical aspect of this that really needs to be dealt with. And if we take our bat and ball and go home and say, we're not playing, that means we have to come up with our own food, our own clothing, our own transport, our own everything. Are we prepared to do that? And how many people would we lose along the way trying to do that? And that really is something that nobody wants to talk about directly.
You got a really good point. And the issue is the transition. And so
yes.
what I'm talking about is the end point. And the question is, and we've talked about this in terms of the technology too. You can't just walk away from your phone. You can't walk away from the internet right now. I mean, that makes no sense at all. Somehow we've got to work this transition to where we effectively, that's why I'm working on the AI, trying to train an AI about all of these new perspectives and metaphysics and new healthcare and other kind of things that you've got to co-opt, intelligently co-opt the aspects of the technology that's available to you in such a way that you can reap the benefits of the stuff and not get dependent upon the whole thing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, John. Penny, you're so right on. And I don't think it's an event. I think it's a process.
Yes.
And the way the process works is there are a relatively few number in biology, we would call ourselves the imaginal cells in a system.
Yeah. Okay.
There are a relatively few number that awaken to a greater possibility. The others may not be seeing that. And as we begin to implement to whatever degree we can that system, we become the bridge and the stepping stone that makes it easier for others to see a glimmer of new possibilities. And that's the way that consciousness works. What we're up against is a very slick, well thought out, professionally implemented technological system of indoctrination through information management. And it's been going on for the bulk of my adult life, at least through the technology. And we just have to know that's what we're up against. But and it doesn't mean that we can't do it. It means that we learn to play the game the way they play, but we direct the outcome for a new purpose. use their tools, use their technology, use their psychological, their psyops, use those techniques like the Saul Alinsky technique of picking a target. You freeze it, you isolate it, you personalize it to drive people apart. You can do the same thing to bring people together. So you've taken what they figured out and repurposed it for your own your own vision and your own dream. That's because I'm with you. And this is the only way that I have thought of in a brief. So there's another piece to this. The piece is they're all pushing a 2030 timeline. This isn't something that goes out for another 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
In the year 2030, something is incoming that they simply call the event. Whatever we want to call the event, and that's a whole conversation that we can have at another time. The point is that they perceive an expiration date for their ability and to do this. And what you're seeing is they are jockeying to be in the best position by the event, by the time the event unfolds. And that's what we're up against. And as we realize the tools that we have available to us, we can implement them in smart and healthy ways, I think.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, my mom always used to tell me that God helps those that help themselves.
Yes.
That principle, I think, is playing out because what the 2,500-year-old texts say when they were remote viewing into the end of this cycle. And they say that we do prevail, but we prevail with divine intervention because we've accepted our divinity. So by helping ourselves, we open the door to that help because we have been willing to help ourselves to realize the depth of our potential.
This has been a very useful and interesting conversation, and we'll come back and do this and revisit some of these ideas again in a couple of weeks. And so thank you both for always provocative kind of engagement. And for those of you who are our viewers, thank you very much for being with us. And this all comes to you from the Arlington Institute, the little think tank that's we started 35 years ago, and we hold forth here in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. Berkeley Springs, our little resort town that's just down the road from Washington and Baltimore. And so we encourage you all to take a look at some of the things that we're doing. You can find out a lot of information on our programs at arlingtoninstitute.org. We've got a speaker series. Gregg will be with us every month. We have a speaker series with transition talks. Gregg will be with us here just this next weekend in a couple of days.
72 hours.
Yeah, and if you can't make it to Berkeley Springs, you can always get it on the on live stream. So thank you all very much for being with us. Thank you, Gregg. Thank you, Penny, and thank you all.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John Penny. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Yeah,
love you all.
Yeah, I won't say Merry Christmas yet. Okay.
Ho ho ho.
All right.
Ho ho ho.